God, Marie here from Skeins. You know what, Brendan? You can never lose me with Skeins because I'm never going to become a technical expert. I'm going to say that right now. So I hope everyone comes back. Third time is a charm, I promise. So we have decided to ditch. Hi, Kathy. I'm so glad you came back. We've decided to ditch video completely and we're going to actually have another look. But you know what? We're going to go to technology that we know doesn't let us down, which is the telephone. And woo! Yeah, and I've got Ethan on the phone. And just make sure if you are there to let me know if you can hear Ethan, because that's what we've decided to do. We've gone old school, we've gone analog.
I like it.
Yeah, I would have thought that we could have figured this out, but there you go. You can YouTube these things to your heart's content and follow the instructions, and it still doesn't work. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming back. Today is day 3, and I have Ethan here from Outlaw Yarns, and we're going to be talking about a number of things, particularly around sort of grippy yarns and designs, and just sort of having a chat about the things that we love. And why don't you do an introduction of yourself first, Ethan, of who you are and how you ended up at Outlaw Yarn, and then we can dive into some stuff around what we're going to talk about today.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm Ethan. My last name is Barkley NU. There will not be a test on that later. I am originally from Canada. I moved to Christchurch a little over a year ago. And one day in September, I went wandering looking for yarn to make a sample for a design submission. And I ended up at Outlaw HQ, and I met Deb. And the rest is kind of history. I was wearing a very elaborate over-the-top sweater that has a stag's head on it, by Nora Gone, classic Ethan maneuver. And Deb and I fell in work love with each other. And I started working for Outlaw HQ, and now I do our design work, and I help Deb run the delightful online side of things, and work every day that we're open in our beautiful shop when we're there. Can't wait to have you all back in soon. And yeah, that's about it. Got to hang out with you, Maria, at Unwind, which was awesome.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, and now you're stuck with me, and I'm never leaving.
No,
that's our story.
Yeah. So thanks for coming along. And as a number of you know, we are a stockist for Outlaw Yarn as well. So, and Outlaw is a yarn that's very near and dear to my heart, being sort of with the development with Deb right from sort of day one. So it's something that I know we're all very passionate about at Skeins, and it was so good to finally meet you at Unwind, and that's why I kind of thought we would catch up today, because we had, 3 days. It was wonderful, everybody, honestly, because one of the things Ethan didn't say is he has worked in kitchens and hospitality for years, and usually when we go away to Unwind, Deborah and I room together and I do all the cooking and we just chill. This year we had Ethan do all the cooking and it was just fantastic. I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love to cook for people. It's really enjoyable.
Yeah, and I've been talking a bit about that as well in terms of cooking as in the last couple of days, because I don't know about you, but I find that when I get stressed or I'm sort of needing to feel good about stuff, cooking is one of the things. It's comfort. You go back to comfort activities.
Absolutely. I'm a stress marinator, if you know what I mean. Like, I definitely tend to marinate a lot of meat and vegetables during stressful times. Like, I just make endless marinades for no purpose. It's a really unique maneuver, I think.
Stress marinating, okay. So that's what the kids are calling it. Very good. So one of the things that you and I discussed yesterday, and it's a pity that they can't see you, because we were going to talk about I have cast on my Rambler sweater. I'm sorry, I've got to do this. I'm just going to lift the camera for those who are live. The dog, one of my dogs. Hoi, you move. Out you get. Where you go? It was his birthday yesterday. He's pushed the door open. There he is. Look.
Aww.
Great idiot, aren't you? You great idiot. He's pushed the door open to come and see what's going on in here with his mother. Anyway, I digress. I cast on the Rambler sweater a couple of days ago, and the Rambler is it's a pattern that's using a sport weight yarn, and it's and I'm using a mixture of Southlander, Cove 4-ply, some Noro, which I had in stash, some Silk Garden, and I needed very brave, and I needed a pop of colour, and I've gone and thrown in Daring from Little Bandit in there.
That's a great choice.
It is a great choice. Well, and because the Noro yarn that I have, and I mean, you and I know we talked about Noro yarns while we were away. They have this wonderful colour palette, and they blend colours quite courageously and differently than normal colour palettes that you would see probably in a Western colour palette. And
yeah, there's always a really unexpected element in there. I frequently find it's either in the really rich warm tone or an unexpected cool pop in the midst of all the other colors.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this particular instance, the one that I've got, which I'm sort of holding up to the screen, has like got these really rich turquoise blues and greens along with black. And then you're quite happy now. The dog's laid down now, knocks over the props, you know, bless his heart. And it's got these sort of mustards in there as well. And so the Daring, of course, with that, I've decided to pull out that sort of mustard tone by using that.
Right, and bring it into the rest of the pattern.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the pattern itself is a simple kind of colour work element. I'm waiting for that mannequin to go falling over. Rufus, hey buddy. No, stop it. Well, you can have to go outside. Crazy dog. This is the thing when you go live, you can dogs. Is actually the colour work itself is relatively straightforward. It's sort of like a sawtooth type piece of colour work, and it's quite blocked. But the one element with it that is you know, the differences in the colour here with this Noro, and then adding quite a strong contrast with the Daring. And it was something that actually when we spoke yesterday, we were talking about, you know, having that element of crazy in our knitting, like putting something in there that is quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that, you know, a lot of the time when we're looking for something a little more, if you will, comforting, that we tend to stick to really simple stuff. But my response to that, actually, when I'm searching for comfort, is to look for distraction. So I definitely end up going a little more crazy. As you know, I recently finished that Yishu sweater, which is for sure an unusual approach to knitting. You know, it's knit side to side in the front, and the back is knit up and down, and the sleeves and everything's all seamed together in a strange way that makes the sweater. So I think I'm definitely here for the element of crazy. And, you know, the Noro yarn is such an interesting thing to work with because it has those long and short color repeats frequently. And when you're working with that and, you know, mixing in another color into a color work that pulls out the complementary tone in the Noro is a great way to, I always like to say tame it, if you will, like it's some sort of lion. And it just really makes it come together in a beautiful way.
And I think it's like, for me, I'm using this as the central piece of colour because it's going to be blocked either side with Daring and then either side again with a deep turquoise Cove. The Noro itself and that central piece of colour work is really going to be a bit of a colour work lottery because, as you said, unlike a printed process, which we do with colour, there's a certain amount of predictability of what it is that you're going to achieve. But with Noro, the way that they create yarns, there is none of that predictability. You never quite know how it's going to pan out, what it's going to look like. And I actually think that makes the project even more exciting because it's going to be either something that I absolutely love or potentially absolutely loathe. You just don't know.
There's nothing like gambling.
I mean, one of the elements with it is because I just don't quite know how those the black is going to work in there, because am I going to end up with these crazy looking black stripes, which is going to disrupt the angular pattern that's created in the triangles? And I just won't know that until I start knitting it. But at the same token, this is a woolen spun yarn. If I don't like those black stripes, I'll just pull it out, refelter, join back together, and just take the black sections out completely, and then just keep going with the blue, the green, the mustard, and the sagey tones. So, you know, it is all sort of a bit of an experiment to be able to see what we can and can't do. So,
well, that's the other thing with the Noro and with some of those more unicorn-like stains, if you have like a natural, more rustic yarn, with those more individual and unique properties in your stash, is if you don't like a part of it, you can, as you just said, just edit it out, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like when you're dealing with superwash per se, where removing a color repeat in a superwash self-striping yarn, for example, is very time consuming because you have to do those Russian joins and, you know, you lose a little bit more color on either side. But with the woolen spun yarn, you can literally just snip, and as you said, wet felt it back together and boom, you're right back into the knitting. It takes 2 seconds.
And even, and not even, and that's the other thing with the Russian joins as well, is, I mean, a lot of those superwash yarns are very, very smooth. They have a smooth construction. So it's really difficult to actually hide that. It doesn't matter how good your splicing skills are. It is so difficult to hide that join because there is actually a change in the texture of the yarn. Because when you have this beautiful, smooth fabric that you create, it then turns into, it becomes, you know, sort of a focal point. Your eye just cannot be helped to be drawn to this. What is that slight imperfection? That is,
and it's so evident in color work too. Like you have that, especially if you get your floats and your tension consistent in your color work. I find that your stockinette can often look even smoother than normal stockinette because you're really focused on your tension doing color work. So that little bump becomes like, you know, a giant hill suddenly visually.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue because I wanted to talk to you about floats. If anyone has visited, and I know Helen's in here and I know she definitely has seen your work, has visited the store, has had a look at, you have done a lot of colour work. You've completed recently the cartography sweater in Knits from Tin Can Knits, which is incredible. And then, but also in terms of smaller projects, you've got the Orfeo cowl from Amy Vandelar, which is in the Bohemia Sport. Yeah, and I took that away as a sample to stitches. And one of the things, the feedback that I got from, other than the fact that people love the design, was they would flip it inside out. I showed everybody. I'd flip it inside out because your floats are freaking perfect. They're amazing. Oh yeah. So what's your secret? I mean, I know a number of people, you know, they work, as you said, you work really hard in colour work to get your tension right. What's your secret to getting those floats looking just as good on the inside as it does on the outside?
Okay, so I have kind of a multi-step approach to this. First of all, I am one of those annoying people that can do color work two-handed. So I always work with my dominant color that I really want to show out, hanging out in my left hand and my background color in my right hand, right? And you work across the rows using both hands simultaneously. Now, I can knit continental and I can knit British style or throwing, but I use a constant tension method on both hands, where I loop the yarn through my fingers and around my index finger the same number of times on both hands at the same time. So it creates that very even tension to start with. And if you go into my project notes on Ravelry, anyone who's listening and interested, I'm EBE Forever, you'll see that I actually counted out in advance where to mark and place all of my floats. So I take a little highlighter and I go through the chart on any of the sections that are more than 5. And I plan where I'm going to, on each repeat of the color work, I plan where I'm going to put all of my trapped stitches or trapped floats so that they don't stack directly vertically on top of each other, but in anywhere where it's more than 5 stitches on that piece, knowing that it was a cowl and it would be off and on over my head all the time, and I wear glasses and I have earrings and all that sort of stuff, so I didn't want anything loose enough to catch. I planned out anywhere more than 5 stitches where I was going to trap my floats in advance to avoid that stacking of the trapped stitches, because it does create a slightly different tension. But if you break up where you're going to trap your floats and you use the, I believe it's the Susan Anderson method that I use, where when you're knitting two-handed, you trap the floats by twisting the yarns around each other. if you work with those two things at the same time and you really think about where you're placing those trap stitches, you can create that perfectly smooth evenness. And also, it means that the back side of the work looks more consistent across every repeat because you're doing the same thing. So it just makes it look more visually cohesive. And I do love to make my color work so I can wear it with either side out. I just find it a really fun option because oftentimes the reverse side of our color work is just as beautiful as the front side of it. And if you have that great tension from using two-handed methods, and if you block it really carefully, that's definitely the last step in the process, is making sure that when you're blocking color work, especially if it's something that's done in the round, most color work is, you want to make sure to block it evenly so that you're blocking it out flat to start with. But as it's drying, I like to rotate mine actually so that it dries evenly throughout. So about every 6 to 7 hours, I gently, maintaining tension by sliding my hands into the garment and stretching it out, I roll it on my hands so that it stays to the same tension and blocks evenly so there's no creases on it.
See, and I mean, in a cowl, that isn't, I mean, that's very easy to do because you're dealing with a tube, but something like the cartography, which is literally colour work from collar to cuff to neckline, I mean, you would have actually have had to have rotated around. That's in DK, it's in silk and pole work. So then that would have been, what, a good 48 hours drying time, I would have thought.
Yes. So for that one, with the cartography sweater, to get that same evenness, I actually blocked it out on a trampoline so that it would dry evenly from both sides at the same time. And if you don't have access to a trampoline at home, there's a really not easy, but there is a solution. If you go to the hardware store, like your local Miter 10, or if you have any sort of screen doors or screen windows in your house already, you can simply take a piece of screen and stretch it out onto a frame and staple it down so that you make that same sort of thing. So to get color work on big sweaters to dry evenly, I basically made a half blocker previously, which if you've ever seen the old style of how they block hats in Scotland, they have big square frames with pegs all around the outside, and you thread the edges through and stretch it out onto the square frame, right? So if you do the same sort of thing with your color work garments, to get that evenness, again, you want everything to dry at the same time. So what I do is for the first 36 hours of blocking a garment like that, I block it flat. Especially when you're dealing with silk, you want it to be about 90% dry before you shift it, even the first time, so it doesn't stretch out vertically. That's one of the things with silk that can happen a little bit. So you want it to get about 36 hours of drying time on both sides. So with that mesh underneath of it, lifting it up off of the surface so that it's drying on the bottom and the top simultaneously. And then if you have a mannequin sitting around your house, the easiest way to do it, of course, is to simply, once it's almost completely dry, place the sweater onto the mannequin and press where the edges have folded while it's been lying flat, just flat with your hand. You don't need to use any heat or steam, and it will block out the rest of the way without any of that creasing, right? If you don't have a mannequin, which not all of us do, the easiest thing to do is actually to take a trash bag and stuff it with, you know, your throw pillows from around the house. Anything that you've got around. Fill up a trash bag and stretch your sweater over this trash bag gently and let it sit over that rubbish bag that's full of stuff because the plastic will stop anything inside from getting moist, and just finish drying like that so that, again, it's drying with that smooth, even tension.
Oh, see, that's something I would never have considered doing. So that's, you know, that's a fantastic tip. And it was interesting. Oh, here we go, the dogs. It was interesting what you were saying around the stretching of the stitching, because one of the things that I find, again, with superwash yarns, is fiendishly known for the stretch in the when you block. And so often when you stretch, when you block those yarns, you have to be really, really careful not to stretch them out too much, because they will actually do that. Which is why when it came to selecting yarns for this particular sweater, I've been knitting while Ethan's been chatting. is that's why I love the Southlander and I love Little Bandit so much, because it's not treated and it is 100% wool, and it is a little bit grippier than you would normally expect. And I mean, like I'm wearing my Mosaic hat, which is in the same sort of fiber, and I think for the longest time people have sort of loved the convenience of a superwash yarn, and there is this misconception that if they're knitting for somebody else it must be a superwash yarn, because the assumption is that whoever they're giving it to are unable to care for it, when in reality I think the joy and the use of these more rustic yarns has now been lost, and I think it's almost in a way things are starting to come full circle with the proliferation of colourwork patterns, because colourwork patterns really need to have a yarn with a little bit of that sort of Velcro grip to them to make sure that those floats sit nicely and the stitches don't get stretched with your tensioning, and when you block that they're not going to sort of go all as loose as a goose on you. What do you think?
No, I agree completely with that. I mean, you know that I am a huge fan of a rustic, grippy yarn. I think that they offer a lot to the characteristics of the fabric that you're making. They are so wonderful for color work and even for brioche and for cables especially, because of that grippy nature. It gives that little bit of added structure. And I hear what you're saying, where people always frequently come in and say, oh, I'm knitting this for someone else, so I want to make sure that I'm making it in something that will be safe if it goes into the washer dryer. But, you know, hand washing of the more rustic yarns doesn't need to happen very often, which is another big benefit of them.
Yeah.
If you're working with an older, an older style yarn that has that grip and that texture to it and that natural quality still intact, you really only have to wash those garments like once a year in the spring when you're getting ready to put them away for the winter again. So I find that to be one of the nicest other benefits of them. And you're right. In and of the fact that they hold on to themselves, they're a lot more forgiving when you're blocking them. You can kind of, I like to use the word zhuzh. It's not a real word, but I made it up a while ago. You can kind of zhuzh it around and push the stitches flat and move them around so that all of the color work lays even with those grippier yarns. Yeah. And there's less distortion from blocking to drying that you experience with those more natural grippy yarns. And you're right with those, and they are so beneficial for that mosaic work as well, like you're saying. Like, they give it that beautiful extra dimension and texture where they kind of pop up a little bit more. Yeah. So you can really see the mosaic work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the other thing I love about them too is, as you were saying, they don't need to be washed as much. I mean, I know that I've done a lot of those jumpers and those more rustic yarns for my husband. I mean, I've done a number for myself. And I've got sweaters that are 10 plus years old, and I can count on one hand how often I've washed them. And
well, wool is antimicrobial, right? Yeah. So when we leave it in its natural state, it's really there for us and very forgiving. That's one of the big benefits of the natural fibers.
Yep, and they just need, and often they just need to be aired, not actually washed. So they just need to go outside. Like, I mean, if the weather is good, like this, this is something that everybody can do. If you've got those knits in your wardrobe or in your cupboards before we head into the winter, is just actually pull them out if you're having a nice day and just pop them out onto a rack, just fold them over onto a clothes rack outside in the air but in the shade, and just air them out for the day. It just makes, coming into the winter weather, it's a perfect time to freshen them up, and they don't require a wash. Yeah.
I agree completely, and that's what makes them so excellent for accessories as well. Anything that you're wearing on your head or around your neck is, they don't build up any of that sort of feeling of having hair product held into them or anything else like that, and it just brushes right off of it at the end of the day. Yeah. So, and that's kind of the benefit too of making a lot of different small projects. So if you're going to do a hat, make a couple of different ones, because then, if you change them out every few days throughout the winter, you're absolutely good as gold for 10 plus years, as you said.
Oh yeah, easy. I mean, everyone knows that I'm very fond of a hat, and I wear them the entire time across the winter. I just love them. And, you know, I've probably got about 8 to 10 on the go at any given time. And for me, they're a project that I love to work on because they're so quick. It's instant gratification. It's something that's easy to work on. And I've talked about, I think in previous videos too, is that I really like a hat if I'm wanting to test out a new stitch pattern or piece of color work or anything like that. Sometimes knitting a swatch is just so yawn. You know, you just look at it.
I actually call them swatch caps.
Yeah. I'm so glad I'm not the only one that does that. And I find that sometimes that's how I do my swatching is I'll swatch it into a hat and then just put some shaping on the top, and it's a way that I can actually turn that into a project and figure out how it's going to perform, what it's going to look like after blocking, how it's going to wear, and all of those sorts of things.
No, absolutely. And, you know, so many of the projects that we're knitting in today's like more modern knitting time are knit in the round anyway. So those flat swatches don't necessarily tell you what your tension is going to be like. So the swatch cap serves two big purposes there. It lets you try out a beautiful yarn and you get a great finished object out of it, and you're going to get a more accurate measurement of your gauge because you're knitting it in the round.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, because that's just it. Because most of us, when we go to swatch, particularly if it's a garment in the round, we'll swatch it in the flat because that's what we've always done. And that's just it. I mean, regardless of whether or not that you knit continental or English, your tension always changes in the round, even if it's only
100%.
half a stitch. But half a stitch in an adult garment, exactly. Look, if you've got a garment that has got oodles of positive ease, may not necessarily so much of an issue. But if you've got a garment that doesn't have that positive ease, and also too, you're knitting stranded colour works, you've got to build that into the mix as well. That half a stitch over 10 centimetres, you know, that can actually equate out to, you know, 1 to 2 inches in positive or negative ease at the other end.
Exactly. If you're knitting something for 100 centimeters or anything over that plus bust, right? You know, there you go right away. That's nearly 5 extra centimeters, as you said. Boom.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it is something that is so important. And then, of course, when you're knitting in the round like that, and particularly, now, that's what I wanted to ask you with cartography. I didn't ask you at Unwind. Was it steeped?
No, so I didn't speak cartography. It has a more, what I would call an Icelandic yoked construction, except it's knit from the top down. But what they did that was really smart and interesting with it is you work the increases in such a way that they don't stack vertically on top of each other. So it works just like those Icelandic style bottom up cardigans, except it's knit from that collar down.
Yeah.
The one thing about that I do recommend for people though is to think really carefully about your cast on method when you're going to be knitting a whole jumper in the round from the top down, because you want something that can bear being stretched repeatedly and still bouncing back to that elastic shape, right? So I think a lot of us, when we're dealing with yarns, especially with superwash, it's so easy to do that long tail cast on for everything or a knitted on cast on. But when you're working with the more natural yarns, you want to really enhance how springy they already are. So if you do like a ribbed cables cast on, for example, which is a really easy, there's tons of great tutorials on YouTube for it if you're looking for that, cast on that gives you a knit and a purl. So it has that little bit of stretch but also structure.
And I think the Icelandic one's quite mobile as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it has that beautiful little almost visible purl stitch in between each one that gives it that great detail. And as you probably have noticed, I'm a huge fan of the old Elizabeth Zimmerman tubular cast on.
Did notice that in Dunedin, yes.
Yeah, everything's tubular for me. So I love the look of those, and it really enhances the nature of those yarns. And again, when you're working on a big garment, like you've said, you want to make sure that each element is perfect, even on a smaller garment. So those different cast-on options, when you think about what they add to the finished piece, you know, that extra 5-10 minutes up front really pays big dividends in the end, just like swatching.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like anything. I mean, I think we'll definitely get together before the quarantine is over, because I think we could do a whole discussion around finishing, because
Oh my God, yeah.
yeah, because that's so often. I know I've done a little bit of judging for various things, and one of the things that always lets me down, or I get really disappointed, is when I see this beautiful body of work in front of me and it's either not been blocked correctly, or the finishing has let it down, or weaving the ends in. There are just so many different things, and the resources are out there. I mean, there are so many videos available now that you can access.
Oh my God, yeah.
I know, like for me personally, I love Suzanne Bryan, so she's got a fantastic set of tutorials. And finishing, it's one of, I guess, because we knit so much in the round now, which has reduced a lot of finishing. You don't have the seaming like you used to. I think almost you've gotten a little bit lazy. There are still actually elements of finishing that you need to have, like really good cast-ons, like a beautiful cast-off. Like for me, from a casting-off perspective, if I've got a cast-off that's not a rib, I absolutely adore I-cord cast-off. I just think an I-cord cast-off is...
I-cord is so versatile.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's great structure, a little bit of stretch.
Yeah.
And it just gives that polished, neat edge, especially if you're coming straight out of stockinette. It stops the rolling.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
It doesn't visually interrupt it.
No, or if you wanted to, you could actually create a bead or a braid, almost like it's almost an upholstery effect, and make it a real feature. There are so many things that you can do. So I think that's definitely something that we can talk about at one of the other.
We should definitely do a fun finishing one. Yeah. Like, there's so many ways to explore that.
Yeah.
I am a cast-on junkie.
Yeah.
I love to cast on a different way pretty much every time if I can. I find it really entertaining, actually, to practice casting on.
Yeah. So I'm just going to, before we disappear, we've had a few comments, but if anybody has any questions for Ethan, pop them up in the comments now, and we'll see if we can get those answered from him. I know for me that I just adore these sort of grippier yarns, and I know Little Bandit is one of the things we adore about both Bandit and Little Bandit is they work so seamlessly with a number of our yarns, and a lot of our grippier yarns, primarily Southlander and Cozy and Snug, are all in larger ball formats, whereas Little Bandit and Bandit are both in 50 gram ball formats, and the colour selection is really diverse, but really it's edgy, it's contemporary, it's fun, it's complementary, and it's so great to be able to mix and match those yarns quite seamlessly, particularly in colour work, to be able to create this really extensive palette. So
it's those deeper, moodier shades of Cove, especially in this four-way. I really love the idea of taking some of the brights from Bandit and blending them through that in colour work and creating like a much more eclectic and modern piece. And you can kind of get that sort of Bauhaus effect by using those darker Cove with the moodier background. Yeah. And because they have that slightly different texture to them as well, you'll get that added element of dimension in your color work. Yeah, absolutely. And I know one of the things that we discussed about too that we wanted to talk about at another session was I've had to move my mannequin off to one side. I'm going to have to lock the door from the dogs. Don't you just love it? The dogs were both inside. You come out, you do your video, and boom, the dogs turn up. Over on my mannequin over here, I've got it's Stephen West Spectra, which was one of the earliest Stephen West patterns that were out, and I've also got a doodler as well. And Stephen is someone that is not afraid to use colour and pops of colour and small amounts of colour and placing. It's a bit like the whole Noro Japanese style of colour combinations. Yeah, he pushes the envelope all the time. And are there designs that I sometimes look at it and go, okay, dude, yeah, that's cool. But then there are other times that it's like, that's freaking genius, that you just, and I guess... as we're talking, I'm actually working on an Excuse Me hat by Stephen West for Deb. So I'm definitely, as you know, a big Stephen West fan. I think you've actually taken my Wish Fjords Wanderer for a little trip before. It was barely freshly blocked, and I pretty much ripped it out of your hands to take it on holiday. So it was tragic, actually. You didn't even get to enjoy it. No. So yeah, I think that a whole Stephen West sort of chat about, especially how to dig into your stash and do those unexpected color combinations, is a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do that as well. So but we're going to wrap this up. Thank you very, very much for, I mean, honestly, everybody, we did plan and we did, and being so patient and coming back, because so many of you I have seen have come back to for attempt number 3. So at least we know we can go old school and audio and things will be fantastic. I'm going to talk to my other little technical expert. So Babes, if you're watching, Babes, I might be giving you a ring because you seem to be able to sort me out on Facebook. So I'm so generationally challenged with this stuff. I really am. As I've mentioned before, talking, no problem. Can talk till the cows come home, but sorting out technology is a little bit challenging for this old bird. Never mind. We'll get there.
I feel you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you get back to your excuse me hat, and we'll hopefully catch up next week. And for everyone else out there, I hope you have a fantastic day. I mean, let's face it, we are now really day 3 into the 28. Well, what is it? 28-day weekend, isn't it? When you think about it, I know, crazy. So get your knitting up. As I said, this is as I've been knitting. There you go. That's where I'm at. So I've done my short rows. I've done my first increase round. And as you can see, it's, I'm really happy with how that's knitting. I just love the fabric that it creates. It's just, and you know what I love? Actually, you know how we were talking about the grippiness, and I mean, I'm about 3 or 4 rounds down, and you can hardly see it. It's she's gone and done a classic make one where you're picking up the stitches below the, the bar below the, in between the stitches. So you can barely see where that increase round is. Now, if this was on a superwash yarn,
it'd be distorted and pulled.
Yeah, and you would see it like, honestly, it would stick out like the back end of my dog, and that would not be an attractive thing. So so I'm really happy with my yarn choices on this so far. So I'm really wanting to get this cracked along, and when we catch up again, hopefully I would have cracked into some of that color work, because I think the great Noro experiment for the central diamond patterning through the middle would be quite good. And thank you. It's really interesting what you were saying about not stacking those floats, because I tend to be a 4 float girl, not a 5 float girl. So and I have to, and just looking at this particular pattern, they do actually have nothing more than a 5 stitch spacing. So I will actually potentially,
I would just let it go.
So I'm going to let that go and just move to that bigger float. Definitely. Well, particularly with the grip on that, I think it's going to be, I'm going to easily get away with that, no problem at all. So thank you very much, Ethan. You've been an utter joy, and no problem at all. And we will let everybody know when we get Ethan back on. And so hopefully tomorrow I can bring you some more progress. I'm looking at doing some more baking again today. So did anyone try out the Shearer's pizza? It's really yum. It's pretty good. But until then, I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. Have a great day and get your knitting out and enjoy. Take care. Bye.
Bye.